All right, little history about Geer Cemetery, and you're looking at it. That's it. Pretty unfortunate one. Neglected history. You will not find this cemetery on Google Maps searches. Maybe you'll find Geer Cemetery on Find a Grave, and that's the only reason I stumbled upon it. And someone was nice enough to put like GPS coordinates in there, and I'll put that in the link below, or just like in the description. But Geer Cemetery was established in 1847 and ended in 1926. The Oregon Burial Site Guide estimates 0 to 25. They have like a rating system like ABC, so that's why that zero's in there. Find a Grave lists 15 individuals, I believe, memorials. In 1935, Dar did a survey and reported 13 known burials, but there was perhaps evidence of more. In October of 1991, a single shattered obelisk with 3 names from the Weeks family, the fallen headstone of Mary Geer, and a metal war plate of 1812 for Joseph C. Geer was noted. There would also be another county survey in 2008. However, it wasn't to fix the cemetery or make improvements. It was done to see if they could widen the road. So it was found that they couldn't widen the road without digging up the burials. The survey would detect roughly 27 to 30 burials. This cemetery sits at the edge of a filbert orchard. This story may be true or untrue, but a Find a Grave user tells the story of one of the owners of this orchard at one time did not like having the cemetery on their farm. He mentions that he talked to a nearby neighbor that lives around here, and they believe that the owner buried or removed some of the old headstones that were there, or damaged them so badly with farm equipment harvesting his filberts that the gravestones were disposed of. From my understanding, and I guess we'll find out together, there's one headstone still standing, and overall, this is just a broken cemetery, forgotten. A large number of children are also buried here as well. So Mary Johnson Geer might be in this location. I'm not really sure. I think that used to be where her headstone was upright. On Find a Grave, it's laying in the ground, but we'll see. Guess is as good as mine. It was the only headstone remaining at the time, but she was born in Rhode Island in 1797 and married Joseph Cary Geer in 1815. We'll talk about him in a sec. I believe he's in the back over there with this plate. But Joseph and Mary would come to Oregon in 1847, one of the earlier arrivals in Oregon, and there's quite a list of Geers when you go and Find a Grave, and we talked a little bit about them before. Unfortunately, when they got to Oregon, Mary would die that very winter. Okay. See the little plate back there? That is Joseph Cary Geer's marker. So only a metal plate indicates where Joseph is buried, next to his wife. So that's why I'm thinking his wife is right here. So, as you can see by this shocking graph, it looks like Joseph was born during a time when there was very few settlers in the area. Joseph would live with his parents until the age of 18 years old. He would volunteer to serve in the War of 1812 against the British and receive a pension for his service. He would return home to his parents, and in 1820 he would marry Mary Johnson. If you were listening to Mary's story before, she is listed as marrying Joseph in 1815. There are little things you run across when researching pioneers. Dates kind of throw you off. Obituary says 1820, historical documents say 1815. But him and Mary would move to Madison, Ohio 3 years later, where Joseph would become a farmer for 22 years. In 1840, they would move west again to Illinois. Like Mary's story, they would come to Oregon in 1847. 1847 was a crazy year for immigration. Word has it that the wagon trains were in constant transition, and you could get kind of confusing at times because there would be new captains, drivers, parties, and tales constantly. Add in the risk of Native American attacks, thieves, disease, diphtheria, dysentery, drowning, and outright boredom. It was quite a challenge, I imagine. And keep in mind, some of the diseases like smallpox or TB, for example, spreads very quickly from one person who has it. Pretty much the whole camp would be screwed at that point. As mentioned, they would arrive in Oregon in 1847. However, his wife Mary would die that winter, as we mentioned before. Joseph would live out his days in Clackamas County and was a dedicated reader, but old age would catch up with him and he would lose his eyesight, unfortunately. He would die at the age of 86 years old in 1881. At the time of his death, he was the oldest member of the Pioneer Association, apparently, and also a pioneer who traveled coast to coast in America. So I don't know if this is the last remaining one. I'll kind of pan the camera over there. There's one back there, and then there's a sign in there for the Oregon Historical Cemeteries, and this cemetery's done. There's not much left. So I'll talk about Flora, Ruth Vaughn, and W.W. Weeks, because I think this is where their headstone used to stand. I mean, it is just broken here. It's a little shocking. So Ruth von Weeks was born in 1831. It's unknown where she was born, but my money would be on Hamilton, Ohio, based on where and when her parents married, along with their siblings, town of birth. Her father, Liberty Vaughn, was born in Vermont, and the reason he is named Liberty is because he was born on 4th of July, which 4th of July is coming this Sunday. Liberty's father was actually one of the first settlers in Delhi, Ohio, just outside of Cincinnati, purchasing land in the year 1800. I guess the area for the most part was still inhabited. And he would marry a woman named Nancy Bryceland Vaughn in 1827 or 1823. Couldn't exactly pin down a date. She was born in Pennsylvania. At some point, the Vaughn family moved to Knox County, Illinois, and would take the Oregon Trail in 1852. I could only find 5 Vaughns on the immigration list for that year, and it didn't include any of the Vaughns we talked about. The Vaughns would arrive in Oregon in October 1852 in Yamhill or Washington County, but Liberty would eventually get a donation land claim in Yamhill County in 1855. Liberty is listed as a teacher and a farmer by trade. He's also listed as being buried among Ruth's mother, Nancy, at Geer Cemetery in Newburgh, Oregon. We'll have to check out that one in the future. So let's talk about W.W. Weeks. We'll just do a different view, I guess. Not much to look at, but Ruth's husband, William Wallace Weeks to be exact, was born in 1823 in Greene County, New York. Oregon Archives said that he arrived in Oregon in 1852. I did find that he married Ruth in the year of 1848 in Knox County, Illinois, so they must have traveled together to Oregon. However, I can't find one Weeks on the immigration list at 1852 for some reason. William and Ruth would have 2 daughters named Mary Weeks Barrett, who is buried at Middleton Pioneer Cemetery in Oregon. She would die in 1941. Finally, we have Flora Weeks, and Ruth and William's other daughter Flora is buried here somewhere. Flora was born in 1855 and died in 1858 at the age of 3. And like I said, I don't know. There was an obelisk here at one time, and it had like multiple names on it, so I'm thinking that's those guys. I'll put a picture in the video too. Apologies, this is at a busy intersection. It's very industrial out here, so I hope you guys can hear me. But let's talk about William Lender Short, who's an 11-month-old buried here somewhere underneath all this brush, who was born in 1849. I think this is a perfect example that you have no idea of the history you're walking on times, and that's what I kind of like about researching these old cemeteries, because coming across this infant led me to the story of Robert Valentine Short and how he met Joseph Cary Geer. So Robert is not buried here, but at Multnomah Park Cemetery. Robert was the first to survey the city of Portland and made the first map of the city, and luckily he kept a diary of his journeys and life. An entry in his journal mentions Joseph C. Geer. Thought I'd read. On February 17th, 1847, I started overland once more across Indiana for a farewell visit to my father in Ohio and my boyhood home in Pennsylvania. April 3rd, 1847, I took passage on the steamer Planet for Cincinnati. From Cincinnati, I went by boat to St. Joseph's, where I met Joseph C. Geer, for whom I had agreed to drive an ox team across the plains. That summer of May 7th, 1847, we crossed the Missouri River and then made up our immigrant train. General Joel Palmer being chosen as captain. November 7th, 1847, I arrived at Oregon City. Being just 6 months making the trip, I immediately opened a tailor shop in Oregon City. In the meantime, with 2 others, Albion Post and Herman Geer, late of Cove. The father of T.T. Geer built a shop, Post being a harness maker and a Geer a shoemaker. He mentions Captain Joel Palmer in that entry, who also captained a train in 1845. Cool little find was Samuel K. Barlow was one of the captains of the 223 wagons, 954 persons, and 545 firearms, 9,425 cattle, and 108 horses and mules. But Captain Joel Palmer in 1847 is believed to have led 85 wagons across the plains. He does mention that he married a woman named Mary Geer in 1848, sister of Herman Geer we talked about earlier. Coincidentally, Herman's Geer burial is unknown. For all we know, could be here actually in all this brush. In 1849, he would travel to California destined for gold mines and meet Joseph Lane, who was appointed governor of Oregon during that time. They would take sailing vessel all the way down to San Francisco, landing in 1849, then traveled by rowboat to Sacramento City, which at the time apparently only had like one wooden building. March 29th, 1849, he paid $200 for an Indian pony and made his way to the goldfields, arriving at the Spanish bar in April. It came up empty when searching the Spanish bar. I didn't know exactly where it was, and it was nowhere on a map. William's father, Robert, would return home, landing in Astoria, and then coming back to Portland, purchasing a 50 by 100 box where Duncombe Building now stands. He would decide to move to Oregon City, mentioned that he bought interest in the first steam-powered sawmill on the Pacific Coast by Stephen Coffin and W.P. Abrams. Interestingly enough, Stephen Coffin also established the Pioneer Waterworks supply drinking water to Portland. There's plenty more to William's father's story, and a link below actually I'll put. But hopefully you made it this far. But as you can see, a simple child's name in the cemetery can lead you down the path of a historical importance. All right, let's start our micro tour, I guess you could say. We'll start off at that obelisk that we talked about. Nothing left. I guess there was a few names on there, those three we talked about, and you could see the Oregon historical sign is getting swallowed up by plants and time. Do you see these little American flags here? I'm wondering if those are just markers for future reference. Another one there. And then we have Mary and Joseph in the back. I think her headstone used to sit there, and it fell on its back at one time, but there used to be one there, but they must have removed it eventually, and maybe they're trying to preserve it. And then the War of 1812 plate is back there. It looks like they just put this fence here to prevent overgrowth of these two markers, the Geers. I guess I'm a little taken back by this one. This is the worst one we've visited as far as condition. Let me pan out and show you the whole cemetery, and that's it. It is geez, forgotten for sure, broken for sure. There is no headstones standing, and if there is, it's just missing all the information. And we just have that war plate back there of 1812. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. This was a bad one, but have a good 4th of July. It's coming up. Stay safe, and yeah, stay safe. If you guys visit here, just look for the Lad Hill and the stop sign there. There's like a little patch here, kind of like on a divider, and then Geer Cemetery will be up on that hill next to the Filbert farm. Like I said, access was not easy.